Tonight, measles exposure. Another possible exposure in Fort St. John. Scam warning. The BC Ambulance Service sounds the alarm. And trapped miners. 3 people trapped at a mine in northern BC. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us. And we begin tonight with another possible measles exposure here in northeast British Columbia. Northern Health saying once again the site of the potential exposure was at the emergency room of the Fort St. John Hospital. Now, if you were at the ER on July the 13th from 3:30 to just after 6 in the afternoon, you may have been exposed to the contagious virus. It's the 4th possible measles exposure at the Fort St. John Hospital since July the 1st. The BC Centre for Disease Control confirming 6 new measles cases this week for the Northern Health region. That brings the total number of cases to 83 in the area and 122 across the province. The BC CDC also says there are 16 probable cases in northern BC. Health officials are advising those who may have been exposed to the virus to seek medical attention. And as Alberta continues to see its total of measles cases grow, Alberta Health Services announcing new potential exposures in the Peace River region. AHS says residents of Fairview may have been exposed to the virus if they were at the Fairview Health Complex emergency room between 11:45 at night on July the 17th and 2:45 in the morning the next day. AHS also releasing 4 more potential exposures locations in Grand Prairie. They say a person with confirmed cases of measles visited the 92 Street Shoppers Drug Mart on July the 8th. On July 7th, 8th, and 10th, there was a possible exposure at the Grand Prairie Hospital. The same person also visited a Mexican restaurant and Winners on July the 6th. Health officials in Alberta have now confirmed 496 measles cases across the province. They say anyone born after 1970 with less than 2 documented doses of the measles vaccine is currently at risk. BC Emergency Health Services is the latest government agency to issue a warning about scammers spoofing its phone number and demanding payment in cryptocurrency. The BC EHS says several people have received calls from what appears to be BC Ambulance asking for fee payments in Bitcoin. The organization says ambulance bills are only to be paid by credit card or bank transfer, and they would never request other means of payment. It's advising anyone with questions about whether a call regarding their ambulance bill is legitimate to contact its billing department. A terrifying situation for 3 miners trapped underground at the Red Chris mine in northern BC. They've been there since Tuesday morning, and the race is on to reach them.
There are 3 miners that are currently trapped underground. They are, to the best of our knowledge, uninjured and in a refuge area.
The workers have all they need to last for weeks if the rescue takes that long. 2 of the miners are from BC, the other from Ontario. The men have been trapped since Tuesday morning following what's been called a fall of ground incident. That's where rock separates from the tunnel and falls to the floor. The Red Chris is an open pit gold and copper mine near Dease Lake. It's about 420 kilometers west of Fort Nelson. At first, the trapped workers were able to communicate, but then came a second ground fall incident, and they have not been heard from since. The suspect in the deadly car ramming attack at Vancouver's Lapu Lapu Festival is now facing more charges.
Over the course of the past 3 months, we've presented additional evidence and information to Crown Counsel, and Crown Counsel has done their independent charge assessment process, ultimately concluded that the evidence supports the laying of 3 additional second-degree murder charges.
The 30-year-old remains in police custody and is scheduled to attend a 2-day hearing this week on his mental fitness to stand trial. BC's new public safety minister says she's encouraged by new data from Stats Canada showing BC's crime severity index falling by 11% last year. Nina Krieger says the drop in crime has resulted in the severity index being at its lowest level in BC in the last 6 years. The minister adding the decrease was the largest in Canada. Among the biggest decreases, violent firearm offenses and homicides both fell by 20% or more. Across the country, Stats Canada says the volume and severity of police reported crimes also fell last year after 3 consecutive increases. However, a coalition of more than 120 community and business leaders in BC are taking issue with the reporting from Stats Canada. Now, Save Our Streets says the report does not provide a complete picture of the level of crime in communities across BC. A province-wide post suggests crime rates are likely much higher because many crimes go unreported. They add, that's because people have lost faith in the justice system. The former president of the Nelson Police Foundation says crime seems to have become normalized, and citizens across the province are now having to self-patrol their own communities. Save Our Streets says the report from StatsCan confirms an increase of 66% in shoplifting across Canada over the past decade. And in Fort St. John, the RCMP reports a similar trend, saying they responded to 324 shoplifting cases last year. That's a 64% increase from the previous year. Save Our Streets co-founder Jess Ketchum says Canadians have a collective obligation to demand more from government to ensure safety in the streets. The sentencing hearing for two leaders of the Freedom Convoy protest that took over downtown Ottawa back in 2022 began today. Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were both found guilty earlier this year of mischief. The Crown is seeking 7 years for Leach and 8 for Barber. The pair were key figures behind the convoy protesting vaccine mandates and other pandemic measures. Well, the ruling is expected tomorrow in the high-profile sex assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players. It's a case that's played out almost every single day in the media, with every piece of evidence scrutinized. So, what's the expectation? CTV's Adrian Gobriel has a recap of the trial ahead of tomorrow's verdict.
From teammates to champions to defendants accused of sexual assault.
This has been one of the most high-profile cases that we've seen in quite some time.
June 18th, 2018, following a Hockey Canada gala, a group of World Junior teammates meet a 20-year-old here inside this London, Ontario bar. Following a night of drinking and dancing, the young woman arrived here at this downtown hotel with Michael McLeod, where they had consensual sex. What happens next has been closely scrutinized. The verdicts now hinge on the legal meaning of one word.
This trial comes down to consent, whether the complainant consented to the sexual activity that did take place.
The young woman, who we can only identify as EM, claims that after having sex with McLeod, multiple players entered and, quote, manipulated and intimidated her into remaining in this hotel room where she says she was sexually assaulted.
And he just said, like, are you okay with this? And she said, yes.
The court has been shown a text message from McLeod inviting teammates to room 209 for a, quote, three-way, something he didn't share with investigators when he spoke to London police in 2018.
She got on the bed and said, who wants to have sex with me?
It's not just the interviews and testimony in this trial that have been shocking. April 23rd, just 2 days into the trial, a member of the jury claims that over the lunch break here inside this market, they had an inappropriate conversation with one of the defense lawyers for Alex Fermenton. A mistrial is declared. The jury is scrapped. May 26th, a second jury is dismissed here at the courthouse after Alex Fermenton's defense team are accused by jurors of laughing and making them feel uncomfortable, something the lawyers in question deny. Still, the jury is sent home. The proceedings continue as a judge-alone trial.
It's exceptionally rare for that to happen twice in one trial. It's not something that I've seen before.
Former World Junior team captain Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, and Alex Fermenton have each been charged with sexual assault. McLeod is also facing one charge of being party to the offense. With the verdicts now being delivered by a single judge instead of a jury, the public will receive a reason for the decision, which is also expected to be shared tomorrow. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, London, Ontario.
Alberta's immigration minister says he's concerned about the federal government's plan to accept thousands of parents and grandparents of immigrants who are already in Canada. Ottawa plans to approve just over 24,000 parent and grandparents of newcomers this year. Joseph Scow says the provincial healthcare systems do not have the capacity to match that demand. And he says Alberta and other provinces should be more involved in determining which immigrants they accept. Now, Scow believes that overall immigration should be reduced to no more than 500,000 people per year. The federal government is committed to reuniting as many families as possible. Despite his concerns, Scow says he understands the importance of reuniting families. Canada's premiers met for the final day of their summit in Cottage Country in Ontario today. They have worked to shore up the Canadian economy by removing interprovincial trade barriers and boosting business with other countries. The talks today shifting to healthcare and public safety. CTV's Rachel Aiello is in Huntsville with more.
Premiers wrapped 3 days of talks about building up the economy and tearing down internal trade barriers united against a common enemy.
We have a crisis in Canada about Donald Trump attacking us. We're trying to protect our economy.
With a former ambassador who briefed premiers yesterday revealing today that reaching a deal by August 1st is highly unlikely.
It's complex and it may take longer, and I think it probably will.
One premier conceded that they'd now consider an agreement on sectoral irritants, such as autos and lumber, in the next 9 days, a win.
I mean, I'm watching Truth Social along with everyone else because things could change in 5 minutes.
Premiers also committed to taking at least one trade mission to another province or territory in the coming year.
We have our points of disagreement, but there are far more points of agreement in terms of how we're going to build our economies in our respective provinces.
And while the trade war with the U.S. dominated this week's discussions, today premiers also carved out time to tackle a pair of other pressing domestic issues. Public safety, including pushing the Prime Minister on bail reform.
We need to, greatly stiffen the sentence, not only for those repeat offenders, but for those that are bringing these poisonous drugs into our communities across Canada.
And strengthening Canada's strained healthcare system.
If we want to say that we're standing up to Donald Trump and we're never going to be the 51st state, let's make sure that our universal healthcare system is strong.
While Canada's premiers and the Prime Minister have come away from these talks largely on the same page, when it comes to fixing the immigration system, Premier Ford made it clear today he thinks the federal government has more work to do. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Huntsville, Ontario.
Well, there's been some relief on the markets following Donald Trump's announcement of a deal to reduce tariffs on Japanese goods. But how does this play into Canada's negotiations and the health of our auto industry? CTV's Abigail Beeman reports.
CTV News caught up with the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association in between meetings on Capitol Hill. Hugh Williams has logged more than 30 with lawmakers and the U.S. administration and is feeling encouraged about a trade deal, but not for the August 1st deadline.
Senior senators, have given us the pathfinding that they're optimistic that we're going to have some framework of a deal that will resolve the trading problems between our nations, ideally by Labor Day.
He says it would be unreasonable for Canada to have an agreement that looks worse than the new U.S.-Japan deal that sees auto tariffs cut to 15% from 27.5%.
That deal has a lot of attention in the Senate and congressional leaders that we've been talking to. And I think that the prevailing view is that Canada should have a better deal.
President Trump is finally putting a stop to our country getting ripped off.
But this week, as a result of Trump's tariffs, General Motors reported a 35% decline in second quarter profits with more hard times ahead, and Stellantis a $2.7 billion net loss in the first half of the year.
We're down about 30% in exports already this year from Canada in vehicles.
Flavio Volpe says he's taken aback by the 15% the Japanese agreed to, and it wouldn't work for Canada.
It's a bad deal. Better to slog it out than to lock in bad terms in the long term.
But it's still a good, valuable piece of insight into what might be achievable and what's the U.S. kind of baseline minimum tariff that might have to stick.
And this afternoon, multiple reports that the European Union is heading towards a similar tariff deal with the U.S. than Japan, a 15% tariff on EU imports into the United States, including autos. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Ottawa.
Well, the doctor who supplied actor Matthew Perry with ketamine has pleaded guilty to 4 counts of distribution. Dr. Salvador Plasencia is one of 5 people charged in connection with the Canadian star's death. In exchange for his guilty plea, 3 additional charges of distribution and 2 counts of falsifying records were dropped. The California doctor faces up to 40 years in prison when he is sentenced. Plasencia's lawyer has argued the doctor was not treating Perry at the time of the actor's death and that the ketamine that had caused his death was not provided by the doctor. The U.S. House Oversight Committee is expected to issue a subpoena for the former girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein within the next few days.
There'll have to be a negotiation take place. is she requiring any type of terms or anything like that to talk to us? If not, then we can roll in there and do the deposition fairly quickly.
Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence. She was convicted of sex trafficking in 2021. Epstein was also facing sex trafficking charges when he killed himself in prison. The House of Representatives is taking their summer recess early. Now, the Republicans are hoping to avoid a vote on a resolution to require the Justice Department and the FBI to release all government documents on Epstein. President Trump is facing something of a backlash by some of his supporters. Trump had encouraged conspiracy theories about the Epstein files, and he promised to release new information, but not much new information has come to light. All right, please do stay tuned. Noah will be right back after the break with weather.